Rats, put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now to get you started for week 2 of the 25-26 college basketball season. I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for you for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want you to send me your questions. I'll get to them later in the live chat. I need an army with me every single time we do a live show and beyond here on Inside College Basketball Now. And if you haven't heard, during college basketball season on Mondays and Thursdays, there will be a live episode of Inside College Basketball Now on Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern. So get in the live chat, subscribe, do everything, obviously, that you want to do in terms of getting your points across for college basketball. But again, I'm going to say it, I need an army with me for every single show that we do for Inside College Basketball Now. Be all that you can be if you're a college basketball fan, and join the party multiple times a week with, again, the only college basketball podcast that's coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Now, it was an awesome, awesome weekend in college basketball. I love the cadence of the games. Everything was spread out. If you follow me, you know I'm a big advocate for standalone games in the sport. I love when there are big games on that aren't competing with each other. And I think part of the reason why we had so many great eyeballs on the second half of Carolina, Kansas, on Alabama, St. John's at the Garden on Saturday, on Arkansas, Michigan State on Saturday night, or even Virginia Tech, Providence on Saturday afternoon, was the big games felt like big games because they weren't always competing with other big games. I'll say it one more time. College basketball needs more standalone games, and we'll get to everything that's on deck this week in college basketball later in the show. But first, let's get to 3 big things. And the first big thing is it was a really, really good weekend for some of the top brands in college basketball. And we are going to start in Chapel Hill with North Carolina for a program that had a very up and down 48 hours after an incredible win on Friday night against Kansas. Now, North Carolina, if you heard last week's show, was in a position where it had to win the game on Friday night to reestablish momentum as a program. It did that with a tremendous second half that was anchored by an incredible performance by freshman big man Caleb Wilson. Now, last week, I talked about how prior to the game between Carolina and Kansas, Caleb Wilson had yet to take a seat at the table with Darren Peterson, with A.J. DeBanza from BYU, with Cam Boozer at Duke, and with Koa Pete from Arizona. He changed that narrative really, really quickly because now we have to really start not just talking about Caleb Wilson as one of the best freshmen in college basketball. He's one of the best players in college basketball. And the thing that is really ridiculous about Caleb Wilson when you watch it, and it's only been a sample size of a couple of games, but his accuracy in the mid-range area is reminiscent of another Marvin Williams. Now, I'm not going to say that Caleb Wilson is going to be the number 2 pick in the draft like Marvin Williams was for North Carolina in 2005. But Caleb Wilson put on an absolute spectacle on Friday night in Chapel Hill, and the power that North Carolina showed inside with Wilson, with Vasar, really, really reiterated that the bread is going to be buttered for North Carolina up front this year. It is vastly different than what we've seen in past years where the strength of the team was North Carolina's backcourt. Because if you think about the engine that really North Carolina has had running its offense over the last 20 years, Ray Felton, Ty Lawson, Marcus Page, Kendall Marshall, Joel Berry, Kobe White, the list goes on and on and on. R.J. Davis, Caleb Love. But this team's a power team. And at the epicenter of this is Caleb Wilson. And Caleb Wilson is now in a situation where he, because of the performance against Kansas, has sent a message that he is unequivocally going to be the face of North Carolina basketball this season, and he's going to be one of the best players in the country this season. He's a bona fide All-American candidate for 25-26. Now, if you looked at the way the game went against Kansas, it was a tale of two halves. And in talking to the North Carolina staff on Friday night after the game, the big thing that changed in the second half for North Carolina was its guard play. And that was directly related to Kyan Evans, the transfer from Colorado State, who we talked about, a couple of weeks ago, was going to be the X factor this year for North Carolina, and for Seth Trimble, who not just for what he did offensively, but what he did defensively against Darren Peterson. That leads us to the 48-hour roller coaster that North Carolina went through over the weekend. On Friday night, you have an incredible high, beating Kansas, earning a signature victory for the program and for Hubert Davis in Chapel Hill. And on Sunday night, a release went out that Seth Trimble broke a bone in his wrist on Sunday in practice and is going to need surgery to obviously repair it. Here's the good news. Seth Trimble is going to be back this season. Here's the bad news. From everything I've gathered, this type of an injury cannot be properly diagnosed in terms of a timetable until after the surgery. But the vibe I got from talking to several well-embedded moles on Sunday night is that this type of an injury generally takes a 6 to 8 week recovery period. So let's go with that, because we don't know, obviously, until the surgery happens if things are better or worse. But let's say Seth Trimble is out 6 to 8 weeks. This vastly changes everything for North Carolina defensively on the perimeter. And now, if you're looking at North Carolina's team moving forward after that incredible victory against Kansas, you are looking at the following games coming up without Seth Trimble, who was the only returning player of significance from last year's team that went to the NCAA tournament, and unequivocally your best perimeter defender, as evidenced by what he did in the second half against Darren Peterson of Kansas. Now, these are the games that are looming for the Tar Heels. Michigan State in Florida on Thanksgiving Day. A trip to Rupp Arena to play Kentucky in the ACC-SEC Challenge in early December. A home game against Georgetown, who I'll get to in a couple of minutes, but is vastly improved from last season. And then on December 20th, the CBS Sports Classic against Ohio State. Judging by where we're at right now, on November the 10th, I think you have to obviously expect that Seth Trimble is at least going to miss the Michigan State game, the Kentucky game, and the Georgetown game. I don't want to say he's definitely going to miss the Ohio State game on December 20th, because you never know how somebody's going to heal from an injury. But this is a massive, massive blow for North Carolina on the perimeter defensively, and just in terms of overall seasoning. So now with Seth Trimble out, the guy that's going to come to the forefront for the Tar Heels is Luka Bogovac. And Bogovac is somebody that the staff is exceptionally high on. He's got a great feel for the game. He obviously adds different dimensions than Seth Trimble. But North Carolina's perimeter defense takes a major, major hit in this type of a situation. If you're looking at the Tar Heels right now over the next 6 to 8 weeks, you are looking at a program, and it's a good thing they have a couple of guarantee games mixed in before, obviously, Thanksgiving's matchup with Michigan State. But you're looking at a program that is going to be shorthanded on the perimeter. And that obviously points to more production needed from Kyan Evans and more production needed from Luka Bogovac. But make no mistake about it, this is a blow to the momentum that North Carolina had after the great win on Friday night against Kansas in Chapel Hill. And this is something that will create an opportunity for other players to get minutes. You're going to see a lot more Luka Bogovac. You're going to see a lot more of Derek Dixon, who, when I talked to Hubert Davis in the preseason, he was very high on. You're going to see more of Jonathan Powell. All these guys are going to have their roles amplified, all of them. But now you're looking at a North Carolina team moving forward, and this is just the way it is in college basketball, that is going to likely start 5 players: Kyan Evans, Luka Bogovac, Jaron Stevenson, Caleb Wilson, and Henry Vasar, who were not a part of the Tar Heels program last season. Welcome to college basketball in 2025. But a great win for North Carolina, a breakout party for Caleb Wilson, who is cementing himself as one of the best front court players in college basketball and one of the best players overall in college basketball. Now, the team that North Carolina beat on Friday night, Kansas, we have talked about ad nauseum on this show. I went to Lawrence. I did a fact-finding mission. I spent time with Bill Self and the Kansas staff. The biggest thing that Kansas' staff was worried about when it came to their team for 25-26 was whether or not Darren Peterson had enough help around him. And I think you got a pretty good glimpse against North Carolina that it felt like there were times where it was Peterson Island. Bryson Tiller had a barrage of threes that went in the first half. Trey White wound up in double figures with 10 points. But a lot of different times, it looked like Darren Peterson was out there on an island like Tom Hanks in Castaway. So I said it all summer, and I'm going to say it again. For Kansas to be vintage Kansas, to feel like the program is back in the standing that it covets, it has to be a top 16 protected seed on Selection Sunday. And watching the Jayhawks the other night, if this guy, Darren Peterson, does not have a great game, I simply don't know where this team is going to get its offense from. Darren Peterson has to have a Carmelo Anthony type freshman year for Kansas to be one of the best teams in the country. But here's the difference. When I look at Kansas, I don't see Jerry McNamara. I don't see Hakeem Warwick. I don't see Billy Edelin, some of the players that Carmelo Anthony had around him 22 years ago when he led Syracuse to a national title. And for Kansas, before the Big 12, there is still a major gamut to navigate. Kansas next week comes to New York, comes to Madison Square Garden to play Duke in the Champions Classic. Kansas then goes to Las Vegas to take on 3 teams in the Players Era Festival. We know 2 of them, an improved Notre Dame team and an improved Syracuse team. The third game is TBD. Then there's a matchup at home with Dan Hurley and UConn in early December at Allen Fieldhouse. At least the game is at home, but you're going to take on one of the best teams in the sport. Then you got a game in Kansas City against Missouri, who looks like an NCAA tournament team again under Dennis Gates. And then you go to take on Will Wade and NC State on December 13th in Raleigh. That's 7 more high-level games that Kansas has before the Big 12. And I'll tell you what, ancillary scoring around Darren Peterson is something that has to come to the forefront, or else the Jayhawks are going to go into conference play with several more losses. Now, another blue blood program that had a great showing over the weekend was the Indiana Hoosiers. And Indiana didn't just beat Marquette on Sunday afternoon in Chicago. It eviscerated Marquette. Now, I'm one of those people who always takes the wait-and-see approach when a team is put together with brand new players, especially players that have not played consistently at the power conference level. What did you learn from Indiana on Sunday? You learned that Indiana is going to run great offense. You learn that Indiana is going to play incredibly unselfishly. You learn that Indiana is going to make the extra pass, and Indiana is going to play with great confidence. And look, Darren DeVries showed us this formula at Drake where he had great success. He did a great job last year at West Virginia, should have been in the NCAA tournament. And Sunday was another sign that Indiana may be ready this season to be a factor again in the Big Ten and be an NCAA tournament team. It was only 1 game. Tucker DeVries, the son of Darren DeVries, looked like an all Big Ten caliber player, had a tremendous first half. Lamar Wilkerson, a mid-major transfer who came up, shot the ball incredibly well, already looks like one of the best shooters in college basketball. And I think just as a whole, the cutting, the spacing, the passing was all top-notch for Indiana. 50% from the field against Marquette, 50% from 3, and 27 assists on 33 made field goals. Those are video game-like numbers for a program, again, that is starting from scratch with a first-year head coach and a brand-new roster. Now, Indiana was great on Sunday. Marquette was not. And it was an alarming performance for the Golden Eagles for a number of reasons. I've been doing this a long time. I've covered Shaka Smart at VCU, at Texas, and Marquette. I can't remember ever covering a team coached by Shaka Smart that gave up 100 points and showed that type of lack of resistance defensively. Marquette looked all out of sorts. Chase Ross, Ben Gold, Royce Parham, Caden Hamilton all had moments when they asserted themselves offensively. But the backbone of Shaka Smart's best teams has been how they make their opponents feel uncomfortable. And Indiana was completely comfortable for 40 minutes on Sunday. And now you start to think about the fact that Marquette, again, a program that has not relied on many transfers, is relying on its internal growth to get them over the hump once again. I thought Marquette looked like a basketball team that was playing its first big game without Cam Jones, without Stevie Mitchell, and without David Joplin. And here's the thing. You can keep running it back with your returning guys if you have certain guys ready to take the baton. You can run it back after you lose Olivier Maxence Prosper when you have Tyler Kolek, Cam Jones, David Joplin, and Oso Ighodaro still in the program. You can run it back after you lose Tyler Kolek and Oso Ighodaro if you still have Cam Jones, Stevie Mitchell, and David Joplin in the program. Will you be able to run it back after you lose Jones, Joplin, and Mitchell? TBD. But it was an alarming performance for Marquette on Sunday against Indiana, and I'm going to go through the numbers again for the Hoosiers. 50% from the field, 50% from three, and 27 assists on 33 made field goals. If you're Marquette, you take that personally because Indiana got whatever it wanted on Sunday, wherever it wanted. Another great brand that had a seminal moment of sorts on Friday night was Georgetown. Georgetown went to Maryland, the start of a local series that everybody has been salivating for, controlled the game against the Terps from tip to finish. We had Ed Cooley on this show last week for an exclusive interview before the game. You heard what he thinks about the DNA of his team. And I went to a Georgetown practice in the preseason, and I saw what I saw on Friday night. Relentless length, relentless depth, limited offense, but a backcourt in Malik Mack and KJ Lewis that may just be good enough to generate enough offense to have Ed Cooley's team back in the NCAA tournament mix, and it was only one game. But those two players, Mack and KJ Lewis, combined for 35 points and 17 rebounds. 17 rebounds is a lot for a backcourt. But this is the Georgetown model this year. It's definitely not going to be pretty, but it could be effective against a lot of teams Georgetown is going to play. Georgetown, with the way this team is structured, with the way this team is put together, has to average about 70 points a game, which it got against Maryland. But 70 to me is the magic number because of how good this team is defensively. If it gets to 70 points, Georgetown's got a real chance to make the NCAA tournament in 2026 under Ed Cooley, which would be their first NCAA tournament berth under Ed Cooley. And thinking about how much this program has struggled in the last decade, remember, Georgetown has not earned an at-large berth to the NCAA tournament since 2015. 2015. Georgetown has not been to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament since 2007, when it went to the Final Four with Jeff Green and Roy Hibbert, who I work with across the street on CBS Sports Network. Roy's long gone. Roy hasn't played in years professionally, and the last time that Georgetown went to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament is when Roy Hibbert was an undergrad at Georgetown. That's how long ago it was. Now, remaining on the Georgetown non-conference schedule, Clemson at home. These are games of significance. Clemson at home. Dayton in Orlando during Thanksgiving week. Either BYU or Miami in Orlando. And then a road game at North Carolina, who we talked about, who will likely be without Seth Trimble after that wrist injury. If you're Ed Cooley, Clemson at home, Dayton in Orlando, BYU or Miami in Orlando, and at Carolina, you got to get a split there. You got to win at least 2 out of those 4 games, and you have to take care of business in your bye games if you want to be in the NCAA tournament. But Georgetown, Indiana, North Carolina, 3 brands that, again, were not part of the vernacular of the sport for a positive reason last season. North Carolina did wind up in the NCAA tournament, all had great moments over the weekend. The second big thing I want to talk about is a game that I was at over the weekend at Madison Square Garden, which was an incredible environment at the world's most famous arena. And it's that Alabama took over Madison Square Garden on Saturday afternoon, 103-96 over St. John's. Just to show you the significance of this scoring output by the Crimson Tide, It was the first time that the Red Storm have given up 100 or more points under Rick Pitino. It was also the first time that St. John's has scored 96 points or more and lost in a game since 1965. That was Lou Carnesecca's first year as St. John's head coach. But the story of the day was Alabama's elite perimeter. LeBaron Philon, who looks like a bona fide All-American, Aiden Holloway, and Latrell Wrightsell, who a lot of people forgot about because he missed the majority of last season with an Achilles injury. But Wrightsell was a big-time X factor on the Alabama team 2 years ago in 2024 that made it to the Final Four. When Wrightsell scored in double figures 2 years ago, Alabama was 10-0. And those three players, Latrell Wrightsell, Aiden Holloway, and LeBaron Philon, combined for 63 of Alabama's 103 points on Saturday against St. John's. St. John's, to me, provided little resistance defensively, and a big part of it was because the Crimson Tide's guards were that much better. And I think we're starting to look right now at Nate Oates' team and his program, and Alabama should be getting a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. And, Nate Oates talked about this in the postgame press conference on Saturday. This program has been to a Final Four and an Elite Eight in the last 2 years. This program has been to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament in 4 out of the last 5 seasons. And now Alabama, again, looks like it's in a scenario where it has the requisites to compete for an SEC regular season title. And think about sometimes how one decision can twist things for a program. LeBaron Philon was planning on staying in the NBA draft. He called Nate Oates. He came back and said, I want to try and win a championship. The question is, will Alabama's front court, with Aiden Sherrill, who I love, be good enough to go that far in the NCAA tournament? One thing to keep an eye on, Nate Oates, who has always been incredibly innovative offensively, Nate Oates went small in that game and used Florida State transfer Taylor Bull Bowen as a small ball 5, and it worked beautifully down the stretch. He made a big 3 late in the game, finished with 17 points and 9 rebounds. A 4-guard look is really on the table here for Alabama, who's going to, again, be one of the most difficult teams to guard in college basketball and one of the best teams to watch in college basketball. Everybody knows I rank 45 teams every day. Alabama is now 3rd in the country. And Alabama, coming up later this week against Purdue in Tuscaloosa on Thursday night, will host the Boilers. And Alabama, if it wins that game, will be the team, obviously, that I rank number 1 in the sport. But you know as well as I do, this is only November. Now, the positives on Saturday were all centered around Alabama. The negatives were on St. John's defense. And I was at the Garden early Saturday morning, chopping it up with the St. John's staff. And there is a real concern that St. John's perimeter, as of now, does not have a stalwart perimeter defender other than Dylan Mitchell. A guy that nobody's really talking about that was a part of last year's run, the 31 wins for St. John's, is Davon Smith, who could really get underneath the opposing team's point guard. Now, Rick Pitino's teams are always going to improve. Rick Pitino's teams are always going to get better as the season goes on. But for St. John's to be the team that it aspires to be, one of the best teams in the country, it needs the other members of its perimeter, Osiah Sellers, Ian Jackson, Joe Zonsanen, to improve vastly defensively. Because I'll tell you this much, big competition is coming again for St. John's in 2 weeks. Iowa State and Baylor are guaranteed opponents in the Players Era Festival in Las Vegas. Baylor had a big win last night over an improved Washington team. I know Desmond Claude did not play in that game, who might be Washington's best guard, but it's still a good win. There's going to be a 3rd game on top of those 2 in Vegas. Ole Miss comes to the Garden on December 6th, and then you have the heavyweight matchup with Kentucky on December 20th in the CBS Sports Classic in Atlanta. For St. John's to be the team that it hopes to be, those 3 players, Sellers, Jackson, Sannen. Sellers and Jackson played better offensively in the second half on Saturday, but those 3 players have to get significantly better defensively. But I also want to tell the St. John's fans out there not to panic for this reason. Last season, St. John's lost a heartbreaker to Baylor and lost to Georgia in the Bahamas. And the narrative was this team doesn't have much of a resume for the NCAA tournament, wound up a 2 seed on Selection Sunday. This team has significantly more opportunities to move the needle in terms of a non-conference schedule. Iowa State, Baylor, Ole Miss, and Kentucky are guaranteed. There's a strong chance right there that's going to be 4 quad 1 opportunities, and then you're going to have another game in Vegas. So there's no time to panic, but there is time to obviously lament the issues. And the issues is St. John's defense, especially on the perimeter, leaves a lot to be desired, even if the combination of Hopkins and Ejiofor is still as good of a 4-5 as you're going to have in the sport. The third big thing from the weekend came on the heels of a classic game in East Lansing Saturday night, and it's that Arkansas's long-term ceiling is still high. Now, I'm going to get to Michigan State in a second, but I want you to hear what I'm about to say right now. Arkansas was out-rebounded by 12 on Saturday night against Michigan State, pummeled on the glass. Arkansas turned the ball over 14 times. Arkansas was just 7 of 28 from 3. And with all that, including some really, really questionable decisions down the stretch from a couple of freshmen who are so talented, are going to be so good, Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas, Arkansas still had the ball with a chance to tie the game. I'm going to say that again. Arkansas was out-rebounded by 12, turned the ball over 14 times, was 7 of 28 from 3, and in its first true road game of the season, at a place like Michigan State, still had a chance to tie. There are things to clean up. There's no doubt about it. Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas made plays in this game that resembled that they're freshmen. But this was a game that was played on November 8th. Arkansas has all the requisites, and I'm not backing off of it, to be one of the best teams in college basketball this year. You play these games because this is how you find out what you need to work on and how good you are. You don't learn anything by playing these guarantee games. I know you have to play them. I know that's part of the deal in terms of selling tickets and obviously making sure you can fund your program. I get that. It's really important. You know, a program like Kentucky makes a lot of money by playing one game at Rupp Arena. I get it. But if you're Arkansas and you're John Calipari and you had 2 freshmen in the fire on Saturday night, Acuff and Thomas, dribbling around, taking questionable shots, maybe driving the ball a little bit too deep a couple of times when, you know, there wasn't something there, and you make a quarter of your 3-point shots and you get pounded on the glass and you still have a chance to tie, I wouldn't want to play Arkansas in a month. And I want to obviously throw this out there. 2 weeks from Thursday, on Thanksgiving night on CBS, you're going to have Arkansas and you're going to have Duke at the United Center in Chicago. As good of an early game as we're going to get for the 25-26 season. But before we transition, let's give some praise to Michigan State, because Michigan State also did not shoot the ball well on Saturday night. Michigan State was 1 of 14 from 3, but it still found a way to win the game. And I talked about Michigan State last week, and I talked about the DNA and the chemical makeup of this team. You have a known commodity at point guard in Jeremy Fears. You got one of the great unicorns in the sport in Cone Carr. And you've got vintage Tom Izzo power up front with Kohler and Cooper. But the Spartans were lacking a wing. But they found production from 2 freshmen, Cam Ward, who had 18 and 10, and Jordan Scott, who had 6 and 7. You got 24 points and 17 rebounds from 2 freshmen. That's how you beat a team as good as Arkansas and going and shooting the ball 1 of 14 from 3. Now, it's also not going to be all sunshine and rainbows for Michigan State here moving forward. Kentucky, a week from tomorrow in the Champions Classic at Madison Square Garden. North Carolina, even if it's a wounded North Carolina team, coming up later on Thanksgiving Day. Michigan State will play North Carolina. So you got 2 blue bloods looming. And you're also going to have Duke coming to East Lansing. This is all before Big Ten play. So there's a lot to chew on right now for Michigan State, but a very encouraging effort. And in talking to the Michigan State staff over the weekend, it's pretty clear that when Michigan State looks at its depth chart, Fears is cemented at the 1. 19 assists, 4 turnovers in the Spartans' first 2 games. A very great Big Ten point guard. Runs the show. Cone Carr has to be out there on a wing. And then you have Kohler and Cooper up front. But that 5th spot in Michigan State's lineup is still open. Tom Izzo has obviously tried Trey Fort. He's looked at different players. He's tried Kurtang, throughout the preseason. Would not shock me if Jordan Scott starts to get more of a look in the next couple of weeks at being that 5th guy for Michigan State. It's something to monitor. They would not have enough shooting on the floor if Fears was playing alongside Cone Carr and Cam Ward. It would be a powerful team defensively. It would be a powerful team on the glass. But if you look at Michigan State right now, Fears looks cemented, Carr looks cemented, Cooper and Kohler look cemented. Don't be shocked if Jordan Scott comes to the forefront in that position. This is only November, but we've got so many things we're still going to get to, and I want to hear from you. Give me your biggest questions in the chat right now that are on your mind. And again, I want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. And again, I need an army with me for every live show. And we are going to be doing live shows every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern during the college basketball season. So plug us in during your lunch break. Make us part of your afternoons on Mondays and Thursdays. And remember, this is only November. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. Your comments when we return.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
Welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein. I want you to like and subscribe to the chat, to the show. Obviously, we're going to get right now into the chat. Want to interact with you. Everything is about the college basketball fan. And again, I need an army with me every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock. Champy TO60Q says, John, Arizona low-key best team in the nation. Well, Arizona has a star in Koa Pete, has a burgeoning point guard in Jaden Bradley, and I think also has just much more size up front than it's had in past years under Tommy Lloyd with Toby Awaka, with Mo Krevish. Friday night at the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles, we are going to have a tremendous rivalry game. There's tremendous rivalry games throughout the week. You're going to have UCLA and you're going to have Arizona. Definitely one of the games this week that I'm looking forward to. Mark Finkelstein says, John, love Coach K telling you that UConn belongs in the ACC. I unfortunately don't see a merger of the conferences, but UConn is a perfect fit. Your thoughts? Well, you're referencing the interview that I had with Coach K, which, again, you can hear on YouTube or also Apple and Spotify, but you have to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now. As you know, we only bring you the biggest and the best guests in college basketball. Coach K, obviously one of them. UConn has flirted with the Big 12. UConn has been mentioned with realignment for a long time. I don't get the feeling that anything is imminent when it comes to realignment with UConn, but we have to understand that the thing that always drives these decisions is football. And UConn's football program has been holding it back from making another move for a long time. And from a basketball perspective, I love UConn in the Big East. But the Big East also needs to be aware that people are hunting one of their biggest commodities, and that commodity is UConn. Think about what UConn has done for the Big East since returning to the conference. UConn has completely reinvigorated the Big East, multiple national titles, the way that UConn brings the brand to the Big East tournament in the Madison Square Garden. It has completely reinvigorated the conference. Rhett OKG 778 says, how about the biggest brand of them all, John, the Cincinnati Bearcats? Well, we're going to learn a lot more about Cincinnati come Tuesday night against Dayton. An interesting series, a local series, but Cincinnati in an NCAA tournament or bust type scenario in year 5 under Wes Miller. Remember, Bearcats have not been to March Madness since 2019. Let's keep taking your questions here. Dan from Queens 659 says, John, which other guard on Kansas will contribute when Darren Peterson isn't on the floor? Well, look, Marco Jackson is a guy that the Kansas staff is very high on. He was a highly touted recruit. He missed last year with an injury. He's still trying to get up to speed. You know, Melvin Council is somebody, a transfer from St. Bonaventure that I know Bill Self likes. Can somebody who was playing in the Atlantic 10 last year make a jump big enough where he's going to be a major player in the Big 12 and in some of these Kansas games in the non-conference? To be determined. I mean, R.J. Lewis a couple of years ago was in the Atlantic 10. It took him 2 years to obviously get healthy and get acclimated, wound up being the Big East player of the year last season. So it's possible. Let's keep looking right here. And it says FSU for Life 100. He goes, my brother and my Hoya's a lock up the turtle. Could we have a top 10 defense this season? I think that's possible for Ed Cooley and Georgetown, a top 10 defense. But again, this is only November. I gained a lot from going to that Georgetown practice. I did in the preseason. And I think you're going to see a brand of basketball that is really kind of similar to what Ed Cooley showed when he was the head coach at Providence College and won a lot of games in the mud. But judging by what I've seen the first week of the season, I think three teams in the Big East, Georgetown, Villanova, and Providence, are significantly better than they were a year ago. Georgetown, I felt that way after I saw the Hoyas practice. Like the length, like the defensive potential, like KJ Lewis and Malik Mack in the backcourt. Villanova, after I watched the Wildcats in an exhibition game at Virginia, looked to me like a team that was going to be competitive in the Big East. Obviously, Kevin Willard has been doing this for a long time, has taken multiple programs to the NCAA tournament. But Villanova was organized and competitive, and also, I thought, very, very much in the mix to win at Virginia in an exhibition game and against BYU last Monday in Las Vegas. And even though the Wildcats didn't win those games, there was enough of a sample size to see that this program, again, has the requisites to be competitive in the Big East. And then I looked at Providence on Saturday against Virginia Tech. Again, even though it wasn't a win and you're disappointed with the outcome, Providence, and I saw this over the summer when I was up there, has revamped its perimeter under Kim English. Jason Edwards, Jalen Sellers, Stephon Vox, who had a really, really nice game against Virginia Tech, almost won the game at the end of regulation. Providence has vastly improved on the perimeter. Those three teams, Georgetown, Villanova, and Providence, should all be significantly better than they were last season. And I think will make noise, continuous noise, throughout the next 2 months during the non-conference portion of the schedule. When we return, we're going to look at some games to keep an eye on this week and also three good nuggets. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons. It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. I want you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. And also remember, we are coming to you with live shows every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern during the college basketball season. We need an army with us for every single show. Be all you can be a part of this show, Inside College Basketball Now. Again, the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Nugget number one as we dive into three good nuggets. Opening the book. Now, this is a very, very small sample size, but through two games, Xavier Booker is having an impact for UCLA at center. He's averaging 14.6 rebounds, about 3 blocks, had a career-high 5 blocks in Friday night's win against Pepperdine. I talked about this in the offseason. Mick Cronin wanted to switch Xavier Booker from power forward to center, play him in more space. It's a small sample size, but so far Xavier Booker is giving UCLA mileage at the 5. Bruins host West Georgia tonight at Pauley Pavilion, and then the big one Friday night against Arizona at Intuit Dome. Nugget number 2, Hall pass. Could Auburn's Keyshawn Hall lead two different power conferences in scoring in back-to-back seasons. Don't rule it out of the realm of possibility. Hall led the Big 12 in scoring last year at UCF before he transferred to the Tigers. And now through 2 games is averaging over 26 points per game. This is one of the more underrated players people are talking about right now in the SEC. And then nugget number 3, Neo's world. I'm talking about Virginia Tech freshman Neoclis Dallas, who had 33, 6 rebounds, and 6 dimes in Saturday's overtime win over Providence at Mohegan Sun. I talked about Neoclis Dallas after I was at a Virginia Tech practice in the preseason. I thought that he had a chance to do for Virginia Tech what Yegor Demon did for BYU last season. But we saw on Saturday that Neoclis Dallas is much more advanced from an offensive perspective in the mid-range, obviously creating for others. He's all of 6'9" at point guard. And there's an interesting backstory here. The agent for Neoclis Dallas is Alex Saratzis, who is also the agent for Giannis Antetokounmpo. So he obviously has the best Greek player in the world in the NBA and one of the best players in the world. But he now also has Neoclis Dallas. And the reason why he ended up at Virginia Tech is Neoclis Dallas was looking at entering the NBA draft last year. And talking to Alex Saratzis earlier, there wasn't really much of a market other than maybe being a second-round pick. And Virginia Tech got into the mix after there was the interest of Dallas to come to college. And the reason why Virginia Tech was able to get in the mix for a player of this ilk was there's a long-standing relationship between Chester Frazier, who is obviously one of the top assistants in the country and, the top assistant at Virginia Tech, works for Mike Young, second tour of duty for Mike Young, was on staff at West Virginia last year, and Alex Saratzis. That was the bridge that got this together. And now because of that relationship, thanks to Virginia Tech assistant Chester Frazier, Virginia Tech has a player in Dallas that is appointment television each and every time the Hokies play. And after the performance that we saw on Saturday against Providence, we can easily say that Neoclis Dallas is going to join the conversation among the best freshmen and the best players in college basketball. And look, I've been doing this a really, really long time, 2 decades at the national level. I have covered great freshman classes. I don't think I've ever covered a freshman class with this much quality depth. I mean, think about what we've seen so far in the first week of the season. We knew about AJ DeBansa. We knew about Darren Peterson. We knew about Cam Boozer. Koa Pete has taken his turn. Dallas and Caleb Wilson have taken their turns. Even in a defeat, you see what John Calipari has with Darius Acup and Malik Thomas. This freshman class is one of the deepest freshman classes I have ever covered in terms of the quality of the players, and it's been a sensational thing to watch. Now, let's get to some games to watch for this week. Obviously, Tuesday night, we start at the KFC Yum Center, where Kentucky is going to be matched up with Louisville. It's a little bit early for the annual showdown between these two programs. I love it, especially since both of these programs have ripped through their first 2 opponents like a chainsaw through butter. Kentucky and Louisville have played a handful of bye games each. We don't know just how good either team is. This will be obviously a great matchup at the KFC Yum Center, and will also be the first major college showcase game for Louisville freshman Michael Brown. So we obviously look forward to that. Then we have another game that's slightly off the radar, and it shouldn't be, on Tuesday night in Champaign. Feels like a Sweet 16 caliber game between Texas Tech and Illinois. Both programs have played an Elite Eight game in the last 2 seasons. Illinois lost to UConn in 2024. Texas Tech lost to Florida last year. But to me, this is a sneaky great game to keep an eye on. Illinois, Brad Underwood said earlier today when talking to reporters, is going to be without Tomislav Ivasic, who is out with a knee injury. But still, Illinois, again, and I talked about it last week, one of the more intriguing teams in college basketball. Texas Tech, obviously anchored by the 1-2 punch of Christian Anderson and All-American JT Toppin. And then late night on the East Coast Tuesday night, you have 2 of the most aesthetically pleasing teams in college basketball, Creighton and Gonzaga, starting a home-and-home series in the Great Northwest in Spokane. Thank you to Greg McDermott. Thank you to Mark Few for scheduling the series, which again gives us two of the best offensive teams and two of the most aesthetically pleasing teams in the sport going at it in a series. Now, one of the things that is obvious about Creighton this early has been its lack of interior defense without Ryan Kalkbrenner. We will know how much of an issue that is after Tuesday night, because Creighton had to deal with it in its first game when obviously the opponent kept going and driving the ball when it played South Dakota last week in the opener, kept driving the ball, kept attacking the rim early in the game, testing the Blue Jays without Ryan Kalkbrenner. And the test will only be amplified coming up on Tuesday night against Gonzaga, because one of the things you have to say unequivocally is that the Bulldogs have, if not the best, one of the best 4-5s in college basketball with Graham Ike and with Braden Huff. But it was tangible to me in watching Creighton last week against South Dakota, how much South Dakota was trying to go at the front of the rim, because Creighton doesn't have a shot blocker like Ryan Kalkbrenner anymore. But this game, 10 o'clock Eastern start Tuesday night, is going to be a really fun game. 3 under-the-radar games to keep an eye on. Tonight, Monday, Iowa State and Mississippi State at the Sanford Pentagon in Sioux Falls. TJ Otzelberger against Chris Jans. These two programs have played in each of the last 3 NCAA tournaments. Tuesday, Wake Forest, Michigan, and Detroit. Also Tuesday, Dayton, Cincinnati. And again, I'm giving you games to watch in between shows. I'll give you more games to watch later in the week. And a special note, Duke is going to be on the road against Army Tuesday night on CBS Sports Network. I will be on the call for that game along with Tom McCarthy and Steve Lapis. Should be a really, really fun game. 7 o'clock Eastern, again, the start time on CBS Sports Network on Tuesday. Want to thank you for joining us. Again, I need you as part of the Army that's with me every Monday and Thursday. We will have live shows of Inside College Basketball now, those 2 days during the week throughout the college basketball season. And I'm also going to bring you interviews throughout the week with some of the biggest and best names of the sport. Check out the Coach K interview that dropped earlier today. He talks about the state of the game, a potential ACC Big East merger, and also gives his thoughts on Cameron Boozer. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this was Inside College Basketball Now.